Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Sekiro, Elden Ring, Sims 2. All these games have one thing in common. They're all simulations of life. You're born and you die. Also, they don't have any difficulty settings. Let's start with this. Imagine yourself a kid again, going back to school. No matter how good or bad of a student you were, there must have been things you were good at, whether it be languages, sciences, social studies, sports, and so on. Nope, not farting or being able to beat up other kids. Nope, also not the number of sausages you could fit in your mouth. That's what she said. Some things were simply frustrating because they were either too difficult, and some were very fun because they were challenging enough. This is what we will discuss today. What is too little and too much, and if there is a line in between the two. Before we dive into different kinds of difficulty, the spectrum of our perceived difficulty of a game, and some examples of how it should and shouldn't be done, it's important to pose the question why it even exists in the first place. Primarily, I think we can all agree to this. Games are a form of entertainment, a type of media to be enjoyed and consumed. But from a business standpoint, games are products. And to sell a product, it needs to be accessible to as many people as possible. Game too hard? Just let it hold your hand. Game too easy? Congrats, man. You're a Giga Chad, Sigma Rizzler, God Gamer, and better than everyone else in this world. Crank it up, bitch. I'm pretty sure most of us play games for two reasons: to have fun and to finish them. And sometimes, difficulty just gets in the way. Enemy too hard to beat? Sections too hard to cross? Game requires fast decision making? A wall looming over you like Drake's snake over his concert first row attendees. A fight or flight response triggers. You've spent a certain amount of hours playing the game, got attached to either the story, characters, atmosphere, gameplay, or whatever rocks your boat. It's time to cave in and lower the difficulty. Crazy. Nobody has ever done that before. It's understandable though. Not every game should be about overcoming challenges. And even when they are, there's no shame in reducing them into flashy and fun MASH fiestas. When I was a child, I remember playing God of War 2 at normal difficulty, or medium, or normal, or medium. Fuck it. Because which child bothers with dodging and parrying, am I right? Also, a couple of years back, I played Horizon Zero Dawn on ultra hard difficulty setting. I thought it was fun until the big portion of the map opened, and then even the smallest robot took a couple minutes to kill. Minutes! And the map was stacked with small and big robots. Not only that, but every purchase was so much more expensive, which meant even to buy equipment I had to spend a lot of time killing even more enemies just so I can afford it. So I had no choice but to dial it down to very hard and have a breezy experience for the rest of my playthrough. And some people will say it's their favorite game despite playing on easy or medium difficulty settings, which goes to show that our thresholds for what's frustrating and what is fun are very different from person to person. Therefore, having difficulty settings available to us must be a good thing, right? So, you're a masochist, huh? You like to take cold showers? You like getting kicked in the balls? You like to live off a minimum wage in Southeastern Europe? Or life is so nice you need a challenge for some razzle-dazzle? I got you covered. Think about a difficult game right now. I bet many of you will say Souls games, as over the years they've become a synonym for difficulty. But why are they so difficult? Is it the narrow areas with enemies gangbanging you? Or is it the bosses that kill you with 2 strikes but need 100 strikes to die? Would players be happier if you could just quick save at any point, maybe right before a boss battle? Maybe, and also maybe not. But I'm not here to talk about Souls games, but instead about different kinds of difficulty. It doesn't have to be tied to combat, at least not real-time combat anyways. It's not always your reaction speed that defines how difficult a game is. Sometimes you need to think fast under a time constraint, like in Catherine for example. Sometimes you need to make smart decisions in city builders so your population doesn't starve to death. Sometimes you need to figure out where to place a unit so you don't lose it permanently. And sometimes there are even sensory aspects that can make your gaming sessions frustrating. Playing Battlefield or Counter-Strike, you could have sworn you heard footsteps from another direction, only to be knifed from behind. Maybe it's the game's fault, and maybe it's the headphones you're using weren't properly configured. Or you're playing an action game with migraine-inducing amounts of UI elements, each with very different colors or same colors, so it makes you not pay enough attention to some elements, or pay too much attention to some because they were highlighted in an unintuitive way. But I got some good news for you. Most games nowadays are the same and unoriginal, also catering to every person's taste, or at least that's what publishers think. Most games have tons of difficulty settings nowadays, some unlocking after beating the game once, some more unlocking after beating the game a couple more times. And don't even get me started on accessibility settings. There's so many of them, changing UI elements, colors, everything to tailor to your spoiled little needs. And yet, I've never even used them. Maybe I should have, I don't know. I might think about it more in the future. Recently, I played Devil May Cry 5 with my girlfriend. Review might come soon. I've already beaten the game when it was first launched, but for her, it was the first time experiencing it. We set the difficulty to the easiest setting called Human. The game was a blast to play, and I might add an eye candy as well. However though, this game inspired me to make this video, and I'll tell you why. For those who haven't played DMC games before, you can purchase different moves for different weapons, further deepening the complexity of combat. Also, before buying the moves, you can go into this kind of like practice room where you can try out the move before you buy it. As I watched my girlfriend play, she didn't use half of the moves she bought, and to be completely honest, she didn't really need to. With her action games experience in the difficulty setting set to Human, she dominated both regular enemies and boss fights. She did take a few hits here and there, but the HP reduction was unnoticeable and the game kept throwing heals her way. She just kept pushing, mashing without dodging a single time, and she came out of most confrontations basically unscathed. And I could tell she really enjoyed playing the game. Unlike me, she wasn't really bothered by the game being too easy, even though she dominated it. For me, however, it was a game-ruining experience to an extent. Knowing the game had so many different moves, and that the game simply didn't push me hard enough to use the full arsenal, buying additional moves, special attacks felt like a waste. This is where I came to a conclusion. Personally, if the game isn't challenging enough for me to use all the mechanics that the game offers, well, now I'm going into this uncharted territory of whether we should play the games the way devs intended. But I probably won't use everything the game has to offer. And for myself, I love gameplay diversity. The more mechanics, buttons to use, combinations, mini-games, etc., the better. So yeah, this is how a game being too easy can be distracting and maybe not enjoyable for some people. But what if the game is just... fuck this shit? I bet you had this thought at some point. And the worst part is, it was most likely by your choice, as games without difficulty settings get a lot easier the more you play them. You stare at the main menu, select New Game, and get gangbanged by 5 difficulty settings. You look at the toughest one and think, you ain't shit. I eat nails for breakfast. I watch JoJo Siwa content and don't even cringe. I'm hardcore. I am...
A few moments later.
Yup, that happened to me as well. I too had my own share of cocky moments right before getting clapped by the game. Of course, I have only myself to blame for this, because in most instances, if something was too hard, it was mostly because I was simply in a rush to wrap things up. Maybe I didn't allow myself to die a couple times learning the range and the animation of enemy attacks, but instead rushed through like a raging bull. Maybe I did the same with RPG games, and instead of applying different status effects on different enemies, I just focused on dealing damage. Or maybe just maybe, hear me out, it's the game's fault. Every time you yelled out, "This game is dog shit, this game is stupid," maybe you weren't really the problem. You know why? Because I mentioned before in my other video that a couple months back, I dropped AC Valhalla, and one of the things I noticed was how linear difficulty settings scale. Sure, advanced difficulty settings are present to fine-tune your experience, but if you disregard the fine-tuning, changing difficulty setting boils down to dealing less or more damage and receiving less or more damage. There might be some other parameters that affect the game difficulty behind the scenes, but we won't know them unless they're specifically stated in the menus. But personally, I'm very conflicted thinking about tweaking different aspects of difficulty, especially if most of them are just how much damage this, how much health that. And oftentimes, I find myself wanting something in between, as some settings are simply too easy and some are too tedious because I don't want this process of murdering a basic enemy to last 10 minutes. I hope that makes sense. But maybe we can't stop thinking about difficulty settings because they're there. Maybe having a reference point such as normal difficulty makes us want to compare. But if it is too easy, just crank it all the way up and then get good, if you know what I mean. I know, I said way too many maybes at this point, but maybe it is for the best if we have We are getting there, almost nearing the perfection of finding the right difficulty. There are plenty of games that don't let you make the game easier or harder, and why should they? These games are designed to be experienced a certain way, and you better do it or else your hard-earned money was spent on nothing. Here comes the airplane, make sure to savor the taste. GTA games, The Legend of Zelda, Mario, Soulsborne games, Hollow Knight, none of these will baby you and hold your hand. I can't really say GTA games are hard, but damn did I hate the helicopter mission in Vice City and flying school in San Andreas. Games that don't have any difficulty settings are meant to be played as is, as I've already said before, and if we think about positives and negatives, I personally believe there's some more positives than negatives. The negative side of lacking difficulty settings could be that the game pushes away players, which means less bucks for the publishers. But the good side is pushing through and learning how to play the game properly, quote unquote properly, will feel rewarding and you will become an overall more complete gamer per se. Also, my observation is that these games usually have the most loyal fan bases. Mario fans will surely buy the next Mario game on Nintendo console, or the remake or remaster of a Mario game from 150 years ago, for example. Same goes for Zelda, same goes for Souls-like games. Recently, I beat Hollow Knight, and I must say, boy, what an experience. When I first started playing the game, I wasn't really consistent with it. I played it once in a while, and I reached about 20 hours without even clearing half of the map. If I don't play the game too often, I will likely forget what I was doing, and that's exactly what happened here. I wandered a lot, I backtracked to places I've already cleared and faced some boss fights without the optimal upgrades. And then something magical happened. A magical fairy visited my Nintendo Switch and gave it amnesia. So I lost my save files. I felt bad at the moment for losing a good amount of progress, but at the same time, I didn't want to put the game into dropped section of my backlog. So I started the game on PC, and it took me about 22 hours to beat the whole thing. No DLC, I know. I realized I needed to either search for hours for the entrances, or Google where to enter DLC content, and I really hate looking stuff up on the internet. So I called it a day, and maybe one day, when the Silk Song drops, if it drops, I will go back to it and do other DLC content. Wait, this video is not about Hollow Knight. It should be about difficulty, okay. Right. Hollow Knight doesn't really have a difficulty setting, and in my honest opinion, it didn't really need one. It did a very good job getting less tedious as I was getting more confident in my skills and reflexes, and definitely less afraid to enter new, potentially dangerous sections of the map. The game was a good amount challenging, and I know the DLC content is even more harsh, but we still need to search for... Failing is boring. Dominating is also boring. There aren't many or almost any games that will make you feel like difficulty is done just right. Take a step back and write in the comments below which game you think did the difficulty just right. What would the just right mean, you must be asking? Well, since I'm the one making this video and you guys are the ones watching it, you gotta listen to me. It's like making the pizza and not drowning it in too many ingredients, if you catch my drift. It's a bad reference, I know. I got some self-awareness too. It should be challenging enough to keep you engaged, but also not too difficult to discourage you. I believe the sweet spot is when even the failure feels like making progress, and I don't mean it in a way kids are taught nowadays, like, it doesn't matter if you win, it matters you participated kind of way. I think most of us can agree with this. Losing progress is tedious. Getting respawned a country away from the boss fight that made you bite your game controller. There's no way I can enjoy running through the same zone over and over again after dying, killing dozens of enemies, while equipped only with a single attack button. Yes, I'm talking to you, Hollow Knight. Stardew Valley, in my opinion, does a great job with non-existent difficulty settings. The game does bind some types of fruits and veggies and some types of fish to the season you're in, so you might miss out on some of them on your first year. But despite the daily weather conditions, luck, and other factors you can't control, no action really goes to waste. Chop some trees and you'll have more wood to upgrade your house or construct new buildings. Go to the mine and no matter how much of raw material you get, you can either sell it or smelt it into bars. Go fish and you'll be able to either sell the fish, save some for eating or cooking, or use some to fulfill your community center collection. This is one example of a difficulty done right, in my opinion. Another one is displayed in a relatively new genre of games that really made me think about and appreciate the difficulty of. Roguelikes. Tired of story games and ready for endless fun? Your wife doesn't let you spend $70 on a single game? Your ADHD brain needs constant stimuli? We got you with roguelikes. Not only for people who like rogues. Hades, Returnal, Dead Cells, Crypt of the Necrodancer. All these have cemented their spots at the top of my all-time favorite games list. Although each of these individually have great artwork, incredibly fun gameplay loop with unique weapons and powers, awesome soundtrack and unique atmosphere, what set them apart for me was how well difficulty scales in these kinds of games. Initially, they all seem somewhat difficult, but what you quickly realize after your first death is that you're not doing the exact same thing over and over again. I mean, you are, but at the same time you aren't. Let me explain. Obviously, the end goal is the same, finish level X or beat boss Z, but the road to the end goal can be vastly different each run. You might face different bosses each time, but you will definitely have different abilities, weapons, modifiers, power-ups, and so on. I can almost guarantee you that you will never finish 2 different runs with the exact same loadout. It's kind of amazing, right?
I mean, it's terrific, right?
And what makes these games incredibly satisfying and rewarding is that even when you die early during your runs, chances are you will probably get some sort of currency that you will be able to use to afford permanent upgrades that carry on to your future runs. So you can experiment, try different weapons and upgrades, have a blast making something either incredibly broken or incredibly useless, but that's just a part of the learning process. These permanent upgrades, in addition to you simply getting better by playing the game, will make the game difficulty scale in a more satisfying way. I highly recommend you to check out any of those roguelikes I mentioned, if you haven't already. To be completely honest, my mind was all over the place trying to piece this video, as I beat games and I quickly forget about them, so the ones I listed are mostly the ones from my recent memory. But my message stays intact. Difficulty is an often disregarded aspect of games, as we all mostly focus on the atmosphere, story, core gameplay, world building, and side content. Before you start your next game, stop for a moment and think to yourself, will I really enjoy this game if I play it on easiest difficulty? And then ask yourself the same question about the hardest difficulty setting. More often than not, you will be happy with the medium setting, and luckily most games nowadays allow you to change difficulty settings if the medium one doesn't please you. If the game is too easy, it will most likely make you neglect what the game has to offer, and if the game is too hard, you might forget why you even play games in the first place. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to click the like button and subscribe button, and also let me know in the comments what you think about difficulty in games. And I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.